we're faced with challenges on a daily basis. And if we just see them as challenges, we're not going to be going anywhere. But if we see them as opportunities, clearly, that's a much more positive way, looking at proceedings. Now, this time, last year, I was doing presentations. And, in terms of the group, I would say just 3 words: President Donald Trump. And that was the reaction, right the way across Australia. There were some people that had a degree of laughter. Some was a bit nervous laughter, but I said, look, it's either going to be President Hillary Clinton or President Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, it was Donald Trump who came in. On the day that he was elected, our share market was crashing. And the expectation was when the US markets open, later tonight, we're going to see a significant fall in the US share market. But what did the investors do in the United States? They said, okay, well, look, we can't do much about that now. So the result's in. What does President Donald Trump stand for? What is he planning to do? Well, the expectation is he was planning to cut taxes and increase spending on infrastructure. And a lot of investors said, well, that's a positive thing. That's stimulus to the economy. And at the end of the day, the share market was up. We came in the next morning and said, what is going on? So this was not expected to happen. But people said, well, look, life goes on. We've got to look at the opportunities. We've got to look at the positives which come out from that. And ever since the US share market has been rising. Now, the tax cuts haven't come through. The infrastructure spending basically hasn't come through. And overnight, Donald Trump's had a few more troubles with his repeal of the Obamacare, the healthcare package. Look as though it's a bit like, well, it's dead in the water, basically. So he hasn't had a lot of success up to now. And indeed, that's one of the things we've got to watch out for over the next couple of months, because the share market has been rallying on the expectation that we're going to see a lot more stimulus in terms of the US economy, and that's going to boost overall earnings and the like. If that doesn't come through, we could see a little bit of a setback. Now, in terms of the presentation today, there's just one simple question that you need to keep in mind as we go through the presentation today. So what? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my customers, my clients, my friends, my family? When you ask that question, and I think that's the most important question when you're hearing economic and financial information, because you bring it back to home base. You're saying, what do I need to do? Now, overnight, this morning, I said in some of the newspapers, they're talking about the potential that interest rates here in Australia could rise 2 percentage points. I think a lot of people were choking on their Wheaties this morning when they read that, and you said, hold on, we're going to have a 2% interest rate hike. Well, no, what the Reserve Bank Board said is the normal level of interest rates is probably around about 3.5%. And over a period of time, perhaps a long period of time, we may need to move our way back up to 3.5%. So the Reserve Bank Board certainly weren't talking about the fact that interest rates are going to get to rise 2 percentage points, sitting in a short space of time. And they're talking about that potential. But that's something that people need to take on board. And they said, okay, so what would be the implication if they start increasing interest rates? What's the implication in terms of my interest rates, my borrowing? Does that create opportunities? So certainly, there'll be other information that I'll be providing today as well. Now, I've let Reinhold know that so I'll be walking around a bit as well. So he's got his work cut out for him this morning. I don't tend to stand in one place. I tend to move around the place, for the video. But I'll try not to stand in front of the screen. That's not a good look. At the end of the day. Before I go much further, of course, the most important thing today is to enjoy your breakfast. Enjoy your breakfast. Don't enjoy the view. Look this way. Not outside, I get the good view, standing up here. But enjoy yourselves, and as is always the case with, the Chamber of Commerce and, these sorts of functions, networking is all important. So go up to people and, ask the simple question, how's business? What's working for you? What's not working for you? We all need to basically, leverage off one another in terms of creating opportunities for Hervey Bay and for the region. Now, I'm clicking the button, so not a lot's happening, yeah, there it is. Me and technology, so we're like that. Now, this is a very important slide. The powers that be at CommSec like me to put up this slide fairly early in the piece. This is the legal slide, or the disclaimer slide. This is the one that basically says, I haven't whipped around the room, I don't know your own personal circumstances, so this is very much of a general nature. You knew that already, but even when I talk to the managing director, guess what? I put that slide number 2 in there. That's why I can say hand over heart, whenever I present, this slide is up there. Now, that's important too, because if you want a copy of the presentation today, I have no problems. So see the organisers today, see the Commonwealth Bank people, you can get a copy of the slides, because one of the slides is actually a little bit detailed. So that's my way of saying, get a copy of the slides, you may see a degree of value in it. It's not going to be a long proceeding today. The organisers will be happy to know. So around about sort of 30 minutes time, hopefully I will be finished. The global environment at the moment is actually quite good. So when we've been speaking over the last couple of years, we've been speaking global financial crisis, and Europe's a mess, and the United States and China. But at the moment, the United States is doing okay. China's continuing to grow. Even Europe is looking a whole lot better, sort of at the moment. Now, we have got this small matter of the relatively new US government. They've been in place for 6 months now, so Donald Trump's popularity hasn't really risen too much over that period of time, but that's one of the challenges he needs to face. Hopefully he can see that as an opportunity. Inflation is still very much low, and one of the big themes that we've got at the moment is we've got economies which are doing well, but inflation remains under control, and that's very much the case so here in Australia as well. We have seen higher US interest rates, but one of the big changes that's happened in recent times, US Federal Reserve over the last week or so has basically said, well look, inflation's under control. We don't need to be in a rush to lift interest rates. So what's happened as a result? The US dollar has weakened and the Aussie dollar has gone up. So why is the Aussie dollar sitting at 79 cents this morning? Well, in large part it's because the US Federal Reserve has said, look, we're not going to be racing out there to lift the interest rates. And if that's the case, so and here in Australia, our economy is looking a little bit better. They're talking about raising interest rates. You can see the amazing change that we're seeing in the currency in a short space of time. Here in Australia, the major focus in terms of spending is on things like infrastructure, the mixed housing markets, and the landing for the housing market. Certainly a number of you have been looking at sort of Sydney home prices and Melbourne home prices. And worrying about, sort of, are we going to see a boom-bust situation? So I'll address that today. It is always good to have the MPs here today as well. I think that's very, very important, sort of, because I hope that you're making them work, because the federal government, the state government, sort of come up with a number of initiatives over time, and I think sometimes it tends to get a little bit lost on us. The fact that they've actually come out with these positive statements and say, we've got some money to give you, some grants to give you, sort of, and certainly in terms of the federal government, sort of the state government, there are some opportunities to get some money out there and sort of spend it on things like that you might need in this local area, things like infrastructure and the like. If you don't ask, you don't know. So perhaps, sort of after this presentation, make an orderly queue in front of some of the MPs and ask them and say, look, is there some money sort of that I should be sort of getting or asking for to be able to drive my business further? Because it is important to say, look, if you don't put your hand up for your business, nobody else is going to do that. And you've got to be on the opportunity, look out for the opportunities around the place. US economy is in good shape. We've got an unemployment rate which is close to 4%. So that's not a bad sort of set of proceedings. But inflation is under control. And that's basically highlighting what I've just said, that the US Federal Reserve is in that happy place at the moment. They've got good economic growth. They've got a job market which is tightening, but wages aren't going through the roof, driving up prices. They've got to be watching out for that, but it's not happening at the moment. And for us, we've got to see that as a signal. If we start to see wages and inflation rising in the United States, we click the wheel in our head and sort of say, well, hold on, that could mean a higher US interest rates, a stronger greenback. That may put downward pressure on the currency. These are the sorts of things that we're going to be watching sort of out for. In terms of China, we've had some data out so this week is showing that the Chinese economy continues to grow. And there's always a lot of gloom and doom when you talk about economics and finance. A lot of people said, oh, and the China boom's over. We're not going to see the likes of that at any time soon. But the Chinese economy continues to grow at an annual rate of around about 7%. So it is doing very, very well. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, China's all well and good, but isn't that all about the mining sector? Isn't that all about coal and iron ore and the like? What we are seeing is Chinese consumers are buying more and more of Australian products. And it's not just our iron ore, it's our coal. They're buying our Wagyu beef. They're buying our wine. When Penfolds launches the Grain Hermitage, where are they launching it? They're launching it in Shanghai. Not here in Australia, but they're launching it, sort of in China. Why? Because they see that as a very, very important, sort of market. The produce, sort of from Australia is very much in demand. Australian agriculture has the status like French wine has around the world. It's regarded as very, very high quality. And we are seeing, sort of more and more goods going to China. Our agricultural strategist likes to call this the dining boom rather than the mining boom. And I think that's pretty apt, actually. I mean, this is food exports to China. And you can see how it's really ramped up, sort of over time. In terms of air freight, we're sending more and more goods to China, and that represents opportunities. I do a lot of talks in Toowoomba. And as you know, in the past couple of years, we're seeing the Wagner family develop Toowoomba Airport. Now, why did they develop it? Because they saw the opportunities. They saw the opportunities of flights going up and sending freight, not just passengers, but sending freight up into the Asia region. And that's now a reality. Now you've got flights going from Toowoomba up into the Asia region. So the farmers in the morning can sort of cut the lettuces down, put them on the trucks. They go out to the airport, sort of on the planes through to the Asia region, Singapore, sort of Hong Kong and the like. And that afternoon, sort of they're on Asian dinner plates. And that's now a reality. And so many places around Australia are looking at creating the same sort of opportunity. So we've got some really good stuff here. We should be looking at that market, so the team underway in terms of China as well. So China represents opportunities in terms of tourism, in terms of agriculture, not just in terms of the mining sector. Now let's talk about Australia. We're doing all right. We're doing all right. No recession for over 25 years. So are we all cheering that fact? Are we all excited by that fact? Well, no. The answer is no. If we look at consumer sentiment, this is basically the chart on consumer sentiment. Current conditions, a lot of people say, yeah, things are okay. In terms of the outlook, the expectations, most people are saying, no, I'm not overly flash about the outlook. It's quite amazing, isn't it? The average person out there is just saying, look, I just don't feel it. We've had 25 consecutive years of economic growth, world record expansion, beating the Netherlands in terms of their expansion, but consumers can't see it. Businesses are saying things are good. Now, I think this is one of the most important indicators that are released in terms of economic data. It does come from one of our competitors, National Australia Bank. As long as the figures are done right, I don't mind. So hopefully the figures have been calculated all right. And what they do is they send out a form to businesses around Australia and they say, tell us how you're doing. The results come back, they collate those results, and businesses around Australia are actually saying, we're doing okay. The level of business conditions is the highest levels in almost a decade. So I think we should be encouraged by that. Businesses are saying we're doing okay at the moment. Wage costs, sort of down. We can, sort of employ, more staff. So what is going on here? Why is businesses so happy around the place at the moment, but consumers aren't overly, so chipper about life? Well, it gets down to really this. The fact that wages, in Australia are growing at a slow pace. People are looking at their pay packets and they say, past couple of years, wages were growing at a 3 or 4% annual rate. They're only growing at 2%. I understand wages are growing at 2%. It's not happening at Commonwealth Bank, but sort of understand over the rest of the community though, wages are rising by around about 2%. Now, people are fretting about the fact that wages aren't keeping up, to the way that they used to. They're not comparing it against the general level of prices. What they're saying is, yeah, but my electricity bill's gone up, my gas bill's gone up. But I would say, well, that's fine, but have you looked to buy a car? Do you know car affordability? Any car dealers in the room? Here's a bit of a plug for you. Car affordability is the best levels on record. We've got Flight Centre. They've got an index on overseas travel. They say that travel affordability is the best on record. How many people spent worrying overnight about whether they would buy a new pair of jeans? Well, you don't, because clothing affordability is the best levels, so on record. Same with food affordability. So we're actually doing okay, but what we're fretting about is the things that are going up in price and the fact that wages aren't rising. Overall, though, wages are still outpacing prices. And I think we need to see that as an opportunity. People are still doing okay. They've still got dollars in their pockets. Remember, in terms of the household budget, a decade or so ago, would you have found things like mobile phones in there, in your budget? Would you have found internet connections or paid TV connections? We're doing that nowadays. And we're going out for cafes and restaurants. So we're buying our morning sort of coffee as well. All these things are happening, but our budgets are still going all right. You think, hold on, so we don't stand back there and say, well, how does that manage to achieve? It must be a wonderful sort of sleight of hand that we're doing sort of okay in the environment. It's basically because the affordability of a lot of items so has improved. And this is one of the measures of spending. It's the number of credit and debit card purchases. The latest figures for May have come through, and that was almost the highest levels on record. That was even bigger, almost bigger than December of last year when we had Christmas spending. So people are actually spending. They're keeping it very quiet, aren't they? Keeping it very quiet, but so there are opportunities out there. Business is different though. We've got to acknowledge that, sort of around the room, that business is different. Nowadays, if I want to buy, a pair of runners, I can go to a sports store, sort of here in town, so I can go to Bundaberg or to Brisbane, but I can also go on the internet and buy my goods that way. So the challenge now is, 5 years ago, the challenge would be, sort of if somebody's selling sports goods, the challenge would be, okay, well, who else in the region, in the town was selling it? Because that would be your competitors. Your competitors now are no longer in the same town, or the same state. They may be over the other side of the world. And that's one of the reasons why inflation is so low. Because businesses nowadays don't feel as though they can be lifting prices significantly like they did in the past. In the past, your costs go up and they say, okay, I'll lift my prices. But if you do that, you may miss out on the opportunities, sort of local sort of buyers. So people do need to be aware of the level of competition. It does open up opportunities for selling our goods to other parts of the world, but it also means to say that you've got to differentiate your product. So no longer are people just going to walk into your door. You've got a number of cafes and restaurants over town, and you might find this interesting yourself. If you walk down the main street and you go past one or two cafes, you might see sort of nobody in them. The next one you might see there's lots of people in them. You say, what are they doing that's different? So what are they doing so that sets them apart? Well, what they're doing in a marketing terms is they're doing the uncommon offering. They're basically doing things outside the square. It may be the sort of coffee that they serve. It may be so the speed of service. It may be the food that they service. But they're doing something different. And in sort of today's economy, businesses need to be doing something different. They need to have the uncommon offering. Because everyone can sell coffee. But so how do you differentiate your product? How does your business stand out from the opposition? And it may be social media. Commonwealth Bank is fairly big on social media. We're even on Instagram. Why you want to see photos from a bank, I don't know. But so we're on Instagram, we're on Snapchat. For all but that may represent an opportunity in terms of social media, the way that you market your business. There are plenty of opportunities out there in this world that we live in. We've just got to think about the way that we can promote our business. Now, I'm not just talking about the global economy or the Australian economy. I am talking about the local economy here. And there's the dwelling approvals, the council approvals to build new homes. If the figures are wrong, well, basically you can blame the Bureau of Statistics and then you can blame the local council because they're the ones that are collating the data and providing it through to the Bureau of Statistics. And then what that's showing is that there has been an improvement in terms of construction across the Fraser Coast. And indeed, that's a very, very positive thing. There are challenges, and I've talked about opportunities and challenges. One of the challenges is getting that unemployment rate down, because certainly here in the Fraser Coast, the Bundaberg region, the Wide Bay region, unemployment is still too high. And if there's one thing that we want sort of our MPs to drive around, sort of this area, is to drive job opportunities, to get that unemployment rate down, to get more people, sort of into work, dollars in their pockets so they can be spending it around town. So that's very, very encouraging. It's very, very encouraging because of this slide. Now, this is the challenging slide I talked to you about, sort of right at the beginning. This is really good data. It comes from a group called id.com.au or economy.id.com.au. They basically specialise in regional data, and they provide really good data, and it's free. That's even better, isn't it? What they're providing is economic statistics. What they're providing is population statistics. And what this basically shows, in the Fraser Coast region, the number of businesses, construction businesses, 1,143, 24% of all the businesses in town are involved in construction. What else is up there? We've got professional services, we've got real estate services, we've got things like healthcare. The beauty of this region is you've got something like 8 industry sectors that have got an industry share above 7%. So you're not totally dependent on construction, you're not totally dependent on the retail sector or in terms of the healthcare sector. You have got a good diverse economy spread over quite a number of industries, including sort of agriculture. The other good news is, here's data on tourism nights across the Fraser Coast area. And what it's showing is a gradual improvement over time. And indeed, more and more in terms of this region, whale watching, sort of is just one example. What we need to get is more and more people coming to the town, but also staying that extra night, because that's powerful in terms of generating business for the region. This one's a bit challenging too, isn't it? The Australian Construction Industry Forum, they come out with data on projects which are around the region. This is Maroochydore, Mooloolaba. We don't have too many actually which were represented on my chart for Hervey Bay and for Bundaberg. But nowadays in terms of business, one of the other things that's really important is you may have to travel a little bit to be able to get the business that is needed. It may take a little bit more effort, but the projects are out there. These are projects out there. Possible projects, early stage projects, ones that have basically been commenced. So get a copy of the presentation, have a look through the list and say, oh, I knew about that one, but I didn't know about that one. Are there opportunities for me in terms of the projects which are on board? Another free service from the Commonwealth Bank, providing that for you there. This one's a little bit interesting as well, isn't it? Most charts, you'll just see a line chart and say, okay, this is the number of dwelling approvals. But these are infrastructure projects across Australia. The beauty of this chart is it actually shows the projects. It shows the Western Sydney roads, it shows the Westgate Tunnel, it shows all the number of transport projects which are happening across Australia. And anyone who's operating in that transport sector sees the tremendous opportunities. This is the expectation for activity over the next sort of couple of years. And again, this information is out there showing that indeed in terms of infrastructure across Australia, that's a big driver. It's not just transport which I've got up there, but certainly so we are seeing more and more spending by state, by local and by federal governments on things like infrastructure. It may be roads, it may be railways, but it may also be hospitals and schools as well. And that's why we've got to always be alert and be able to say, what is happening in our area? What are the opportunities out there that I can leverage off the back of? Now, home prices. The one thing I know when I'm travelling across Australia is the last thing that you want to know here in Hervey Bay is what's happening with Sydney home prices. You don't care, do you? You don't really care. What you do care about is if they're rising, hopefully that's going to create a bit of a wave motion across Australia. And indeed, that is happening. We've got Sydney home prices up over 12%, 14% in Melbourne. And we are starting to see those effects filtering out. So if Sydney home prices and Melbourne home prices are a little bit higher, what that tends to see is Canberra prices are pushed up. Even Hobart prices have been pushed up. And we are starting to see more and more of that. It takes a degree of time, but if the cost of those is going up, you might get people from down in Sydney and Melbourne say, particularly around winter time, they're looking and saying, look, what am I doing staying here? What am I doing staying here? There's tremendous opportunities to be able to retire, to be able to move, to be able to drive around Australia. Let's go up to the Hervey Bay, the Fraser Coast area, the Sunshine Coast area, let's sort of see sort of the number of the opportunities out there. Now, we don't believe that home prices are going to continue to soar like they are down south. Why? Well, if you've gone to Sydney recently and you travel in from the airport, you know there's a lot of construction happening. These are the number of homes, the number of dwellings being built across Australia. This data goes back to the 1960s. You can see the shoot up that we've seen over the last couple of years. There's a lot of work out there. There's a lot of homes being built. Now, we don't believe it's going to create a boom-bust situation because those homes that are being built have got buyers. Nowadays, a bank doesn't sort of provide money to developers unless the developers sell 110% of the properties off the plan. So that means those projects, when they come to fruition, every sort of a unit or apartment or a house has a buyer sort of connected to it. But it is something to the fact that once that supply comes on, home prices won't be going gangbusters as they have in the past. In terms of interest rates, well, I did say at the start, in terms of interest rates have the potential to rise over time if our economy continues to do well. They haven't been doing anything for a long period of time though, have they? You can see in terms of the cash rate, it's been going sideways. This is the lowest cash rate that we've ever seen in Australia, 1.5%. An emergency level cash rate. Should it stay in place forever? Well, it's not going to stay in place forever because eventually things improve, inflation starts lifting and we see higher interest rates, and that's something we need to be conscious of the fact. Now, certainly the fact that interest rates haven't been rising has caused more and more people to be able to say, well, what am I going to do with my dollars to be able to get a good return? A lot of people have been putting in the housing market, and you'd expect to see return on residential investments going through the roof. And indeed, residential property has been rising over time in terms of investment returns. But you may be surprised that actually the share market's been doing okay as well. The bond market's been rising in recent times as well. So anyone who's had a diversified portfolio and put some of their money in property, some of their money in the share market, some of their money in term deposits and bonds and the like, has actually done very well over time. And of course, a lot of us don't find it very, very hard to be able to pick winners, to be able to pick the turning cycle for these sorts of things. But the important thing is that we have seen good growth in investment returns over time. And it's our view is that we are going to see some changes in the rankings perhaps over time. Shares are probably going to do a bit better than property over the next couple of years. But we expect to see returns rise. And basically, returns rise when an economy is doing well. If an economy is growing and that's generating higher profit, businesses basically sort of get those higher profits coming through, and that should be reflected in the share price. It should be reflected in building happening across Australia, and indeed that is the case. Now, one of the things happens when you're presenting economic data is that they don't tend to stay where they are. They tend to move around the place, some of these variables. Now, I had to submit these slides around about a week or so ago. The Aussie dollar was sitting quite comfortably, sort of around about 76, 77 cents. Where is it today? Well, it's about 79 cents. And that shows that you can never take your eyes off what is going on because we can get substantial changes in a short space of time. Good news or bad news? Well, if you're planning that trip to America, my son is just arriving probably about 10 minutes ago in Honolulu, so he's doing okay. 79 cents the Aussie dollar is sort of at the moment. It's hard work when you're a university student, isn't it? But anyway, he's probably loving the fact that the Aussie dollar is sitting at 79 cents. But for a lot of businesses saying, hold on, this is bad news. So I want the currency to be down rather than up. So exporters hate it. So the rural industry, regional industries, hate it as well. But so nowadays, so you do have the opportunity to be able to talk to your financial institution, to be able to say, okay, what do I need to do to be able to protect myself against this? Sort of how do I insulate, so that change? And indeed, that may be one of the questions you asked today. The outlook. The outlook. I've got right at the top of my radar screen President Donald Trump. And you may have seen through some of these slides that I've mentioned his name a couple of times. And it is very, very important because if Donald Trump fails in terms of healthcare package and he doesn't get up the tax cuts that we've been talking about, we could see the US share market start to say, hold on, we were rising on the expectation we're going to get this really good growth happening in the US, and it's just not happening. We're not seeing those tax cuts, to come through. So keep it on the radar screen, because it has the potential to affect things like interest rates, exchange rates, and the share market. Oil prices, that may seem a little bit strange. But what we've got at the moment is we've got the OPEC oil producers trying to cut back on production to support prices. And then we've got producers in the US which is trying to pump the stuff out. The good news for us here in Hervey Bay is that prices have come down. And we do a report on petrol prices every week. And a lot of people say, what do you do that for? Filling up the car with petrol is the single biggest purchase for most households across Australia. And a lot of people said, no, it's a slab of beer, isn't it? It's got to be a slab of beer. No, it can get up, sort of 100, sort of 100, sort of $20 to fill up your car or four-wheel drive or whatever happens to be with petrol. So it does make a difference. And if the price is sitting around about $1.15, $1.20 rather than $1.40 or $1.50, that's extra dollars in people's pockets. What do those people do? Do they save that money? They say, I'm going to put it in the bank. I've saved an extra $20 this week. No, most people say, no, I'm going to go out and spend that. So that may represent an opportunity for you. People, sort of say, look, I'm feeling a little bit more chipper. The petrol price isn't going through the roof. There's a few extra dollars to spend. You could do that in terms of your marketing around the place, particularly if you've got a cafe or restaurant. Federal Reserve, we're going to watch them in terms of what they do with interest rates, because we just don't know whether they're just pausing on the sidelines or whether they're going to come back. Home prices here in Australia, inflation and the job market. These are the things that sort of should always be on our radar screen. And finally, this is the last slide. I find people tend to cheer up at this point in the presentation. I can never work it out. But what we're expecting over the next 12 months or so is a better growth in the Australian economy. Last year, it was around about 2%. And indeed, there was a number of weather events and cyclones and the like, which really sort of did impact and constrain growth in terms of our economy. Our expectation is 3% growth over the next 12 months. That's the same forecast that the Reserve Bank holds as well. Inflation, we see creeping up, but not leaping sort of up. And if that is the case, that means the cash rate will remain relatively on hold. But that's the thing to watch. If we start to see wages rise, if we start to see prices rise, then the Reserve Bank will start to get a little bit toey and start to focus on higher interest rates. The Australian dollar, well, our currency forecasters would just say that our forecast has been realised early. That would be their view on proceedings. But it's one that they're going to have to go back and think about, because we have seen a bit of a change in proceedings, certainly at least sort of sitting in the range at the moment, right at the top end of the range, and has threatens to go through the roof. But I told you some of the factors which are at play. Well, thank you very much.